Hi there, Malcolm here for my 409th Booktube video, and today I'll be bringing you a celebratory video as I've completed 2,000 books. Yes, that's right, I have 2,000 completed titles on my reading list, and so I thought I'd quickly share with you my reading journey. Growing up, my parents read to me the likes of Enid Blyton and Willard Price, and so I learnt to read at a very young age and really cut my teeth on Dick King-Smith and Roald Dahl. I found the reading scheme at school somewhat lacking. I think it was The Village with Three Corners. Didn't really do it for me, but I've always enjoyed reading. When I was about 10 or 11, our English teacher gave us all a small exercise book, normally used for things like French vocab and stuff like that. And in it, he'd put the alphabet at the beginning of every third page and told us that every time he finished a book, let's write down the title and who it was by under the relevant letter. Something I set to with gusto. And so began my reading list. Around that sort of time I'd progressed from my Roald Dahl and Dick King-Smith and had moved on to my father's science fiction collection, where he introduced me to the likes of Harry Harrison, Bob Shaw, Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein, Paul Anderson, James White, A. Van Vogt, Joe Haldeman, Eric Frank Russell, Jack Vance, Anne McCaffrey and Julian May. To name just a few. At the time my favourite book was Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. The film came out around my birthday, so it was extra exciting. I was a complete dinosaur nut, and actually still am. And I would read Jurassic Park over and over. Literally, when I'd finished it, I'd turn to the front and continue reading. And so there was a period of time when I was kind of stuck on just that one book, and my reading list did kind of get left by the wayside a bit, because I'd already got Jurassic Park written in there. And so I don't really know how many times I read Jurassic Park. Moved on to secondary school. I was still a voracious reader. I had access to my own personal laptop by this point, where my list emigrated from this rather tired and battered notebook into Microsoft Works. Comment down below if you remember Microsoft Works. And so my list grew. Now I did have a few issues with what to put on it or what not to put on it. Having read a lot of Roald Dahl, for example, most of that was on there, but did The Enormous Crocodile count? Because that's a square picture children's book. Surely that doesn't qualify. And so there was a certain period of indecisiveness whether or not certain books should go on the list, because obviously when I first read it, I was at the appropriate reading age and it would have been a challenging book for me to read. But does it qualify for my list now? So some of the books on my list of 2,000 books are small picture books. So did I include the books I read to my children when they were small? Not really. I included some Dr. Seuss because I'd already had Cat in the Hat and such like on there, and so when I read Horton Hears a Who to them, I thought, well, that qualifies because I've already read that author. So I've kind of struggled to know which ones to add and which ones haven't. So when I say I've read 2,000 books, I've got 2,000 books on my list. However, some I have read I haven't put on there, and some I have put on there I have read more than once. Jurassic Park, for example, I've read, I can't even tell you how many times. And then in 2007, I started my job in the office. And so I had access to Microsoft Excel. And the trouble with starting at the bottom rung of a job is if you are very capable of what you're doing, you find the tasks given to you are over and done with far too quickly, and with loads of time we're left to not have anything to do. And so I recreated my list from memory into Microsoft Excel. I think at the time it was about 720 books. And as I learned how to use Excel, the list grew and became more and more convoluted and gave me trend charts and all sorts of amazing, wonderful things. Because I started telling what year I read books in. So at that time I had everything read before 2007, because I couldn't say exactly what year I read them in. And then during and after 2007, I was able to say what year books were read. And of course, if ever a book did get a reread, rather than having multiple entries of a book, I could say on that book's entry how many times I've read it and when. Sorry, I'm a data guy. It's just how I roll. And then in 2017, I started counting graphic novels as books. I've always been reading them, but I never counted them on my reading list. I don't know why particularly. Maybe I thought if you can sit and read a book in half an hour, then it's not really one that qualifies for the list. But I've since changed my mind, and graphic novels now do go onto my list. As I fast forward to completing He Who Fights with Monsters by Shirta Loon, and on my review for that I announced it's a special book because it is number 2,000. Of course I still use Microsoft Excel to keep track of my reading, but like with any other serious reader, I did implement Goodreads to a degree. However, about 5 or 6 years ago, it fell out of favour because it was an Amazon product, just trying to plug Amazon really. I still have the account. As I said, I progressed onto Storygraph and more recently Pagebound, and I find these two are really good means of keeping track of my day-to-day reading. And as a result, my Excel list has also developed to take into account what month I've read books. I still have that backup because there's no guarantee that Storygraph and Pagebound will still be here in 10 years' time. But I've really enjoyed keeping track of my reading. Not for any bragging rights, really. Yes, I'm saying 2,000 books, but I don't know if that's a lot. It might be for some, it might be pittance to others. And can I remember all 2,000 of those books? Just about, yes. Can I remember what they were about? No. The Chippewa One by Elizabeth Moon, for example, that's been on my list forever, and I have no recollection of anything that happens in it apart from some soiree that takes place at one point. It doesn't help, it's like book 2 of a series, but never mind. But most books I do remember. So I'll finish off with some figures from my Excel sheet. So 2,000 books, or 583,243 pages. And if I can count how many books I've read, including the rereads, I've actually read 2,253 recorded. Also, before 2007, the details are a bit iffy. I've also read 374 different authors. So my most read book is Jurassic Park, but I have no record of it. I also suspect some of the Roald Dahls, particularly Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I read multiple times as well. But again, that's all happened before 2007. And yes, I read it to my kids again, but that was only like once. So recorded The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams and Where's My Cow by Terry Pratchett. And they have a score of 4 each. Although I suspect Where's My Cow has more. But for that one, I didn't count a reread if it happened again in the same year. I've read 242 books aloud to other people in the house. 154 of them I've read to my wife. And that equates to 58,620 pages. And then a quick breakdown of the types of books. So normal novels or novellas, or anything that even vaguely qualifies as that, counts as 1,355. Graphic novels, 476. Short stories, 82. Comic strip collections, such as Far Side or Calvin and Hobbes, 38. Non-fiction books, 42. Poetry books, 3, and 2 of those are Roald Dahl, and one's by Spike Milligan. And 1 pop-up book, which I read earlier this year. And books themselves, 1,735 are physical books, 12 of which I also reread as an Audible. 41 I've listened to on Audible, and other physical books, 212 of those I've had out from the library. And needless to say, the overwhelming majority genre is science fiction, by a huge margin. Shortest book, about a dozen pages or so. Longest book, well over 1,000. Average was around 250. So there you go. That is my first 2,000 books read. I'll see you again at 5,000. How are you getting on with your reading journey? We're all on our own journeys. There's no competition here. How do you record your reading, if at all? Comment down below, please. But as usual, if you have nothing nice to say, then please keep it to yourself. Thank you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and other stupid things. If you want, until next time, see you later.